There's a lot going on in Arizona surrounding the Cubs as they go through spring training. We haven't quite gotten to the games yet. They're coming up on February 23rd. But sparks are starting to fly, and a lot of that has to do with the future of Cody Bellinger. Is he coming back to the Cubs, or is he going somewhere else? Cubs Chairman Tom Ricketts talked to the media yesterday. Scott Boras responded. We're going to talk about that. The Cubs made a couple of signings. Who are those guys? And what does that tell us? And the Cubs don't have a closer set yet, but that could change. We're going to talk all about that right here on the Cubs Baseball channel. Make sure you guys like and subscribe. Give us a thumbs up. Baseball season's here, and it's really exciting as we get closer and closer to having bat and ball meet and baseball games commence. Let's get this thing started. Go Cubs. What do you say, everybody? I'm Mick Gillispie. Welcome to the Cubs Baseball channel. Pleasure to see you guys here as we talk about the Chicago Cubs. We do it every day, and then if something breaks or something happens, we jump on and we talk about that. And when the games start, we'll get into that as well, which is what we're all really looking forward to. But I'm at Broadcaster Mick on the socials, and appreciate you guys for all swinging over here and hanging out. All right, let's talk about the news of the day. And I think this is some really interesting stuff. And if you pay attention to this channel, if you've heard me talk about this before, I've mentioned exactly what Tom Ricketts said to the media in the past because I know him and I know the way that he operates. And basically, yesterday, the chairman of the ownership group, Tom, who's, I guess, been doing it 15 years now, which is surprising because I guess I've known him 15 years. I didn't even realize that until I read some stories about this situation. But so Tom spoke to the media, all right? And basically what he said was, I think, directed at the fans. I think it was directed at the Cubs, and I think it was directed at Cody Bellinger. And he's basically said, there's been some discussions, but it hasn't gotten to negotiations yet. And, he went on to say, it was a longer quote, but, without playing it, until they're ready to negotiate, there's not much we can do. We have to wait when it gets serious. And then we'll talk about we'll talk about what the money amounts are. Basically, me messing it up. But, I'm paraphrasing anyway. I mean, and what he's saying is this, okay? Is he saying it to Scott Boras? Well, maybe. But I think he's saying it to a lot of people around the situation. He's saying the Cubs want Cody Bellinger back. Now, there's been a lot of question marks as to Bellinger's future, right? What's he going to do? We saw that he was the comeback player of the year, and the team loves him. The fans love him. Cubs fans love him. Cubs fans want him back. The front office seems to want him back. Teams around the league are worried about the 2 years that he had before that great season last year. They're worried about his lack of hard contact, and some of that can be attributed to two-strike approach. Some of that could be that he just doesn't swing as hard because he wants to make contact. But the analytics crowd does not like that. They think that leads to outs, and they're worried that he's, going to get paid this big contract and he's not going to live up to it because of that. I don't know. I mean, I don't tend to agree with that, but at the same time, I feel like that's why the market hasn't been so great for a player that we saw last year do a lot of really good things. Now, Scott Boras is the agent of 5 guys holding out right now. It went from the Boras 4 to the Boras 5 because you can throw JD Martinez in the mix. The guy hit 33 home runs last year, and he's a free agent. So now you got Bellinger, Martinez, and Matt Chapman, the third baseman from the Blue Jays. You got Blake Snell and Jordan Montgomery. And it's been reported that there's a contract on the table or an offer on the table from the Yankees for Snell. And the rest of them, I mean, you just don't really hear a whole lot. And I think part of it is that, and we talked about this before, is that the market just isn't there. The teams aren't real interested in overpaying for players at this point in time. And I think what Tom Ricketts was doing today was he was addressing this so that Cody Bellinger would see, whether he knows it or not, that the Cubs are interested in getting a deal done, but there's not a negotiation. Basically, they're asking for this. He's worth this, and the Cubs are probably offering this. That's normally how it goes. And then you meet somewhere here. So him coming out and saying that tells me that the Cubs are getting to the point where they're going to move on from this if something doesn't happen, because you're starting to get closer and closer into camp and games and then the regular season. And I think that over the years, the Cubs have said by not signing Boras clients, they've had some, but they've been acquired in trades or they've been drafted. Cubs historically don't deal with Boras well. And one of the main reasons is something else that Tom Ricketts mentioned, and that's what I've said on here since I started doing this. Tom's leadership style leads me to believe that he would do exactly what he said today. And another part of the comment, he talked about how if he negotiated with Boras, that he would be overstepping Jed Hoyer, who is his GM or team president or whatever his title is. But in essence, he's the GM. I know they've changed all the titles, but at the end of the day, he's the general manager of making sure that the Cubs have a roster because he's the one that needs to negotiate this. And in the past, there's been owners that have negotiated with Boras. They've gone over their general manager's heads, and he's gotten huge deals from it. And that's just not the case here. And Tom Ricketts isn't that guy. He's just not going to do it. And that's why the Cubs don't have a track record of signing these type of deals. Now, they did sign Bellinger last year, and they signed him from Boras, but it was a 1-year deal situation. You're talking about signing a guy for a 1-year contract where you're basically just, hey, here's $17 million or whatever it was, come in, play. That's not what the Cubs are really that concerned about, right? Those deals are part of it. And, and obviously, you're not talking about, $20 million, let alone $200 million, which is what, this contract feels like the Boras people want, right? So when that happened, Scott Boras came out and he kind of answered Tom Ricketts, and he said it's the normal owner's signature move to be involved in the efforts of recruiting players and reaching out to me so I can convey to the player the ownership of the team covets them. He went on to say that it is the essence of free agency, and it is a custom and practice for ownership to express commitment and involvement, right? And kind of said what he didn't understand what Tom was getting at. The Cubs don't like negotiating with Scott Boras. They don't like being held captive, and it feels like some of these contracts are that way. They don't want to pay for a player who they don't feel like is going to contribute for years that they want, that both parties know are going to be basically just free money down the line. If you give Cody Bellinger 7 or 8 years, the chances are that 7 or 8 years from now, he's not going to be playing baseball anymore, even in his 30s. That's just the way it is. So with that said, by coming out and saying this, it signals to me that the Cubs really do want Cody Bellinger, because if it was anyone else, they just wouldn't say anything about it and move on. So really, it's almost like a volley back to Boras. Hey, you want him to come here. We want him. We need to get this thing going. And Boras's strategy, which leads me into the next part of this discussion, is to just waste everybody's time and sit back and wait for the market to change if it's not the market that he wants. Well, you have a couple choices as a team owner. You can, or a franchise, is that you can either, back off and move on and find other options, or you can give in, or I guess the third one would be you can wait. But the problem with waiting is that you're now starting to put the team in a bad spot, because the team needs to know if you're on it or not. And this isn't a guy that's coming in to be the 25th or 26th guy. This is a guy who's, I feel like, is going to be the face of the franchise, and he's still going to get paid more than anyone else. He'll get a great contract. I'm guessing that he'll do better than Dansby Swanson did last year. But at the end of the day, if Boras and those guys aren't willing to sit down and start talking numbers, it's not going to happen. Some of you guys have gotten into the comments section, and you guys have talked about Major League Baseball needing a free agency deadline. And what's interesting is that we talked a lot about Rob Manfred, who's on the screen there with Scott Boras, and the fact that Manfred said that they'd like to do that. Major League Baseball would really like to have a deadline for free agency. But Scott Boras, and I do agree with him on this, that if you did have a deadline, then it would benefit the teams over the players, just because the market would close. I mean, we saw that with Imanaga, right? However, for the betterment of the game, it would be great to have this, because then we wouldn't be sitting around here, haggling over millions of dollars, when everyone's going to come out of this better off, right? I mean, there's no way Bellinger's not going to get $130 million or more. I just can't imagine a contract like that, right? I'm guessing it would be around 145. And maybe you get it higher than that with incentives, but who knows? Just for the sake of argument, maybe I'm wrong. But he's not going to get 200 million in this market, right? There's still going to look, $100 million is $100 million. I mean, it's a lot of money. And even if it's your last contract, you're never going to worry about money the rest of your life. What I think fans want is they just want to get this over with and either go out and buy the guy's jersey and cheer for him on your team, or go somewhere else. And if your strategy is to hold out and start to sacrifice the continuity of the team itself, that's not a good strategy. So, I'm just curious to see kind of what the next move is here. If I'm Bellinger, I'm saying to my agent, look, let's get this worked out. It's the best fit. You don't want to go play for the Angels and lose, which is going to happen. And what are the other options? Toronto's telling you that they're not doing it. They're not paying. And honestly, the Angels are saying they don't have any money. That their owner was going to sell. He's not selling. He's going to stay put. They don't want to bury themselves in debt. The Giants went out and made their moves. I'm just curious to know, where's the deal coming from? Or maybe you sign another one of those pillow contracts for another year, and then you do the same thing next year. or you sign and you take the money that the Cubs are willing to give you. But it just feels like this is at the end of the road right now. And Tom Ricketts coming out and talking about it and kind of saying, that hey, this is something that we either need to get, basically we need to get some numbers from them so we can figure this out. And I'm not going to be the guy doing it. It's going to be Chet Hoyer, kind of sets this thing in motion. And whose responsibility is it to try to work out a deal? Is it the team or is it the player? So I don't know. I mean, I think, honestly, I think it's both sides. But in this situation, I feel like Boras is not winning. He knows it, and he's just trying to hold out as long as he can to see if something changes and maybe he can get the contracts that he wants for his 5 guys. And the Cubs are kind of at a spot now where they're doing everything they can to get this team ready without Bellinger. And I think at some point they're going to say, we're not doing it. And I hope that doesn't happen, because I still feel like it's 75-25 that Bellinger comes back to the Cubs. But if the Cubs pull out of this, I don't know where he's going to go. I think he'd be in a spot where he was last year, where he's going to have to do a year or two, and maybe he'll get paid bigger money, but just, no long-term stability at all. All right, the Cubs made a couple of other moves I want to talk about. First off, they signed Dominic Smith, who's a first baseman. He was a free agent. He's a former Met and Washington National. Around 2019 and 2020, he was actually kind of an up-and-coming guy. 2019, the guy played 89 games for the Mets and ended up with 11 home runs, 25 knocked in, hit 282, had a 355 on base percentage, and then came back the next year and actually got some votes for MVP in that shortened pandemic season, where he hit 316 and had 10 home runs and 42 knocked in. But then since then, that's the only time he's ever hit 300. 21, he hit 244, had a 304 on base percentage. 11 home runs, less than a dozen. Last year, he hit 12 home runs, had 46 knocked in his first year with the Nationals, and hit 254 with a 326 on base percentage. Now, why would the Cubs sign him? Is that he's an insurance policy at first base. Goes into camp, competes for the spot. What if Michael Busch just can't do it? And Matt Mervis is terrible, and they feel like they don't have anything else, and they don't sign Bellinger, then Dominic Smith is like getting that insurance to that spot that you hope that you can count on. So, again, not going to overwhelm you, but at least if something goes wrong, and if he makes the team, you pay him, and, he's got a decent contract, and you got somebody with some experience. Now, the other guy they signed is corner outfielder David Peralta. This one kind of surprised me a little bit. But at the same time, Peralta in the past has been a pretty good player. Last year with the Dodgers, very pedestrian numbers for him. He hit 259 with 7 home runs and 55 driven in. But I've always thought he's a pretty good player. He's got a career batting average of 279. And then he's got a little bit of pop. Not a big home run guy, but, can hit the long ball. He's hit 117 home runs in his 10-year career. A really good platoon type guy. He won a Silver Slugger with Arizona. That's where he spent most of his years. He won a Gold Glove in 2019, so he can catch it. I think that he played. Don't forget about the year he played with Tampa Bay, but you know what? He's another one of those guys that you sign, gives you some experience. He's proven in the past that he can play a little bit and, adds competition to the Cubs during camp. Now, you got Happen left and you got Suzuki and Wright. So, I don't know where he's gonna find his playing time. And then if you end up with Canario and Hollywood Pete making the team along with Mike Tauchman, I don't know how this works out, but we'll see. Now, the last bit of business is that Craig Counsell basically said that he hasn't named a closer yet. So Adbert Alzolay, not the closer yet, but could be. But he wanted to go through camp and have the competition and keep it open for guys. They just signed Hector Neris. Maybe they feel like Neris could do that. He had a career year a season ago. But I think that's what spring training is all about. Obviously, Alzolay is a big part of the bullpen, and if they have success, he's going to have a good season. You would think that anyway. But naming guys to jobs before the season starts, you know what? I love going in, seeing what a guy can do. And, Alzolay had the injury at the end of last year, but still, when he was healthy, he was so good. The Cubs wouldn't have been where they were without him. So hopefully there's a good spring training battle, and we got like 3 or 4 guys who are like, okay, all these guys can close games. Anyway, that does it for the show today. I had a lot of fun talking about the situation with the Cubs and Boras and even Rob Manfred. I feel like this is what baseball really needs. They need a healthy debate about free agency and how much a guy's worth, how much they're asking for. I think it's a good thing that baseball teams aren't overpaying, but I think it's a good thing that the players get a very fair salary, because a lot of this started because in the past, the owners just absolutely took advantage of the players. Then I feel like it kind of flipped, and now, maybe we're resetting things a little bit. But at the end of the day, I still feel like Cody Bellinger will eventually come back to the Cubs. And I think that today could be the day that it happens, maybe not, but I think that it's definitely a day where he's going to have a conversation with his agent, or maybe he did that yesterday, and say, hey, you know what, let's negotiate. Let's see where they're at. Let's see where I'm at. And, maybe we can make this happen. The last thing you want if you're a Bellinger is you don't want to be used as a guinea pig for Boras and the market. And what I mean by that is you don't want your contract negotiation to have to do with anybody else's. And I know that that's what they want. Hey, we can't take a bad contract. We can't take less because of the next guy coming. All of these should be done individually, in my opinion. I just think that's what I think. And you work your deal out. He works his deal out. He works his deal out. Because if that's the case, then you're basically not signing someone because you're afraid of what some other client you have is or isn't going to get. And the market changes and money changes. And honestly, you look at, the economy right now and everything else, man. The TV revenue, which we talked about over the weekend, and a fair contract could be one that falls in that, 125, 135, 145 range. I know it's not what you want, but no one's offering you that. So take it. So we'll find out. Maybe I'm actually wrong, but I want to hear what you guys think. You get in the comment section. You tell me. Maybe I'm dead wrong. I can tell you this, though. We're really close to the start of baseball season, and that is a good thing. Thanks for hanging out. Don't forget that the show is presented by the Tennessee Smokies. They're the Cubs AA affiliate. They help keep this channel going, and we want you to reward them with your business. SmokiesBaseball.com/store. Check out their Cubs gear. Check out their Smokies gear. They won their first championship in 45 years and more. SmokiesBaseball.com/store. Go Cubs.